Hello and welcome to my second film analysis. Today I'll be talking about the Netflix show Bridgerton, and it came out at the end of last year. I absolutely fell in love with this show when it came out. I watched it in one day just because it was so fascinating and like encapsulating, and it's just nothing like society as you see today. And so Bridgerton is a show it's a historical drama set in historical London, which is sometime in the 1800s. And it mainly follows the young lady, Daphne Bridgerton, who you see in this picture. And she is someone who has made her formal debut into London society. And what that means is she's like of age, she's a proper woman who's looking for a husband. And eventually she crosses paths with Simon, who is the Duke of Hastings. Obviously, a duke is a big deal. And so Simon finds himself being like the eye of every single lady in London. And so the two of them end up kind of forming an alliance and making a deal where they pretend to be sort of spoken for with each other, like they pretend to have some sort of agreement so that Daphne looks more desirable to the remainder of London men, and Simon looks like he's taken and has his heart spoken for, so like other girls and their mothers will leave him alone. And so the first thing I wanted to discuss was interpersonal relationships. And so the main focus of this presentation will be about Daphne and Simon, but I thought just to have some more talking points to throw in Daphne and her brother Anthony as well. And so relationships are pretty self-explanatory. Daphne and Anthony are family. Anthony is the oldest brother, and unfortunately their father passed on. We didn't see it in the show, but he's not around, so Anthony kind of takes up the mantle as like the man of the house, and he feels responsible for all of his siblings and even his mother. And with Simon and Daphne, it begins as a sort of platonic relationship, strictly business just for their alliance, but then eventually they grow to fall in love and get married. And so we see many communication styles shift between all these characters. And so for Daphne to Simon, it starts off as structuring because they're strictly business. They're just trying to figure out, okay, we're going to go to this many balls together. We're going to go to this many picnics together. You're going to send me flowers if you're not going to come. Strictly business, just structuring. And then it kind of shifts to egalitarian. And egalitarian is a two-way form of communication. Where there's more like sharing info, more two-way communication. It's balanced. For Simon to Daphne, at first it's relinquishing. He's like just kind of taking what she tells him. Relinquishing is like receptive to ideas, kind of shifting the responsibility to the other person. And so Daphne's like, I want you to show up to this many balls. I want you to send me flowers. And Simon's just like, all right, okay. And then eventually it moves into withdrawal, which is basically a lack of communication. And that's because Simon can see himself falling for Daphne, and he doesn't want that. He doesn't want it for her or him because Simon had a lot of problems with his father. And because of those problems, he made this deal with himself that he didn't want to bear children to like end his family line to spite his father. And so Daphne, the most important thing to her is that she wants a family and she wants children and a life, like a big family in her future. And so Simon doesn't want to take that from her, so he just goes into withdrawal. And then eventually it moves into dynamic because he kind of is fed up with the withdrawal and just the emotions take over him. Like dynamic is super high energy and like sort of like pleading. And with Anthony to Daphne, because Anthony kind of sort of has that big family boss kind of role, he starts off as controlling. Like he sets up a engagement with Daphne and some other man that she didn't want anything to do with without telling her, despite her asking him over and over to not do that. And then it kind of shifts into egalitarian when he realizes, oh, like this isn't what she wants. And his mother also has a role in shifting his form of communication. And then with Daphne to Anthony, at first it's withdrawal because she doesn't feel that he even listens to her when she tries to talk. And with the man that Anthony set up the engagement with, the man actually tried to like attack Daphne, like harass her, or sexually attack her. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the London society back then, um, any sort of woman that's caught with a man like at night or anything could ruin her reputation, and make her unmarriable. And so she didn't even want to tell Anthony that, because she was afraid of like what he would say, or like he wouldn't believe her because she's just a girl. And so that's the withdrawal, but then eventually it moves into dynamic because she realizes that she really needs him to listen to her. And then a big thing, another concept I wanted to talk about was perception. And so Daphne's perception of all these things and Simon's are quite different. So place in society, it's 1800s London, it's very traditional and formal and conservative. So for Daphne, her perception of her place in society is just a woman who needs to find a man to marry. She needs to find a man to marry and to have children and raise a family. That's her perception of her place in society. Meanwhile, Simon, obviously he's a duke. He needs to take care of his people and his land, and he needs to figure out all these like farming deals and all of that kind of stuff. It's very rigid. And for mannerisms, Daphne has to be formal. She has to have good etiquette. She has to be prim and like perfect, basically, in the eyes of everyone else in society. She can't really cuss. She can't act out. She just has to look good to everyone. Meanwhile, for Simon, obviously he's a man. They had a lot more freedom than women back then. He could pretty much act however he wanted. He did have good manners and he was perfectly respectable, but very different for the two of them. And then daily life, pretty much all women would do, and this is including Daphne, was they would play music, play the piano, they would knit or like crochet, and then they would go to attend parties, and that was pretty much all like a high society woman would do. And as for Simon, he would sometimes go to this sort of like parlor club place, which I think is where he's sitting in this picture. He would go to a club, drink with his guy friends, and sometimes just like hook up with random girls, because that's okay for men to do back then. Very different perceptions for both of them in that kind of society. And then the final concept I wanted to discuss was the social penetration theory, which was like the most important theory we could see throughout the progression of this show. And so the social penetration theory states that two individuals will go from impersonal, like non-intimate communication to eventually forming like deeper, more intimate connections. So basically, you go from knowing if you know Carl Jung's theory of like the soul and self, you go from like someone's just persona, knowing their persona, to knowing their like core self, their true self. And so that's something we see very prominently between Daphne and Simon. And so at first, they're complete strangers. The first scene that they met, they really didn't even like each other, because Daphne went up to Simon and Simon thought she was just another girl that wanted to like try to make a move on him. And so she kind of caught him off guard when she was like all kind of sassy at him. And so eventually they strike that deal, and that's just kind of a surface level type thing where they just are keeping each other company, and eventually they start learning more about each other, going in depth about their pasts and their true feelings, and that is what kind of progresses their relationship into what it becomes, which is love. And a famous line from the show is "I burn for you," which is what they both say to each other, showing just the depth of their relationship and how in love they are with each other. And so yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I had a very good semester with everyone.